and for something that today a lot of people wouldn't even be going to jail for. And it was horrible, and we found out about it, and we gave a commutation. That means we were able to get Alice out, and she has been just so outstanding, and I'm so proud of you, and we're giving Alice a full pardon. I just told her. We didn't even discuss it. We just, you were out there, I saw you in the audience last night, and I asked the folks if you could bring Alice over. We're going to give a full pardon. We're going to do it right now. That means you have been fully pardoned. That's the ultimate thing that can happen. That means you can do whatever you want in life, and just keep doing the great job you're doing. Alice has done an incredible job since she's been out, and recommending other people. We said, how many people are they like you? There's only one Alice as far as I'm concerned, but how many people are like you or your circumstance where they were given this massive sentence, and they're good people, great people? And she said, so many. They're in jail, so many.
I want to make a comment on what's being done here. This woman got life in prison for a drug charge. It was a non-violent offense that she got busted for drugs that got life without parole. I don't know all the ins and outs about it, but obviously the president and his administration is bringing this to the light, because she was actually one of the speakers, I believe last night or the day before or something, in the president's inauguration. For me to have to go to jail for 37 days over being interested or concerned over the benefit of 3 little children that David and I, at the time my younger brother David was still living, for us to have been ridiculed towards doing the Good Samaritan thing, towards trying to take care of the well-being of 3 little children, is a disgrace to the Weakley County court system, especially during the heated argument of the time that David and I was fighting for justice by hiring attorneys over one incident or another, dealing with a freaking evil, demonic group of people out here that was targeting, hunting us. It's disgraceful that I, to this day, still have a felony on my record. And to think that I'm going to open up my house, my property, in order for it to be a full refuge center or a recovery center in the name of either the Windmill Ministries or the name of St. Dale's Recovery Shelter, would be asinizing to me. To think that I would actually be that stupid or vulnerable in allowing for druggies or past druggies to come onto this property, knowing that the judicial system attacked this property the way that it did. And whenever I say it attacked this property, I'm talking about 430 Beech Grove Road or 291 Thompson Road, which both pieces of property are connected together. Sharon, Tennessee, zip code 38255, because they both have the same zip code. To think that I'm going to go and do ministry work towards helping the sick. You know, what did Jesus say? Jesus said that he didn't come for those that needed not a physician, but for those who did. You don't post signs on your property advertising towards what you are and who you are if you didn't have good intentions of doing what you was doing. But we couldn't get the blessings from the courts. We couldn't get the blessings from the DA, from the prosecuting attorney. We couldn't get the blessings from Tommy Moore and Tommy Moore's daughter and Tommy Thomas and all these other law enforcement agencies around here because they was against Jubby and Jubby's message, even though Jubby's message was a message of peace and utopia. I would be an absolute fool. Kind of like stopping and pulling over and helping, under the Good Samaritan law, helping a hitchhiker. I almost got busted for this up in Knoxville, Tennessee. It was a female that looked like she had been worked over by her boyfriend. 2 black eyes, cheek all blue, clothes ripped and tore. I gave this girl a ride. She was walking. Just so happens there was police officers that was scoping her out, that was watching her. She was a plant. She was nothing more than a plant. They had planted her there, hoping that somebody would pull over to pick her up, but had ill will in picking her up. Come to find out, the very hotel that she supposedly lived at was the hotel that I was living at, towards an in-town stay. She actually approached me. Well, would you like for me to do anything else for you? I'm like, for me to do anything else for you? I was the one wanting to be a subservient unto you, towards helping you. It looked like that you was the one that needed help. Come to find out, it was a sting operation, and they was trying to bust people for open prostitution. And of course, if I would have been that right illegitimate person that wanted to have a sexual encounter with this person, either a blowjob or open sex, I'm pretty sure I would have went to jail for God only knows how long for open solicitation, if I would have been that right person. It just so happens I wasn't that right person, and the cops, the undercover cops, was waving it off towards trying to hurry up and get her out of my automobile, because they realized that the whole deal had went sour as far as the wrong person picking this girl up. Whenever you have law enforcement agencies that's operating in this format towards deliberately entrapping people and setting people up, just like David and I being concerned about these children across the street. I mean, they was having open sex basically outside their home, inside their home without the curtains pulled. I mean, we seen the door get knocked off 3 or 4 different times. The ambulance got called out here a couple of different times. I seen the guy get up on top of the automobile, jumping up and down like an ape. I seen him take a $1,000 phone, David and I did, and throw it against the house and turn it into nothing but shatters. One argument after another that turned into a love-hate relationship across the road. You know, as soon as the ambulance and the cops pulled up out here, well, what happened, miss? What happened? Oh, I slipped and fell. Yeah, you slipped and fell, all right. You fell into the grip of that crazy ex-boyfriend that you had that wound up taking his fist and slinging it just a little bit too hard up that jaw or inside that rib cage and wound up cracking one of them ribs or cracking that jaw. That's what happened. Didn't have nothing to do with you falling. The fact of the matter is, David and I was very, very concerned to the point of involving child abuse. The child abuse center, not only in Nashville, but the child abuse center here in Weakley County. Did the courts want to hear anything about that? No. No. A matter of fact, it was the public defender, not the public defender, excuse me, the public prosecutor in Weakley County that met me in Walmart parking lot in Martin, Tennessee, that degraded me because I was the one that wanted to go after Lucifer, Satan in the flesh. And told me that if I even so much as got around him again, that he would fill out paperwork pertaining to harassment or intimidation or stalking or whatever. So yes, I had a whole group of people. Wasn't just the neighbors. Wasn't just the Ridgeways of the Sheffields. Wasn't just the people down the road or up the road. It was people that was ingrained into our judicial system that was purposely either not doing their jobs or they was purposely setting us up to the point that David and I was basically just wasting our money, our time, and our effort towards trying to get something done, especially whenever you have attorneys that don't have the backbone of standing up against these judges to begin with, or standing up against this illegitimacy in the counties to begin with. That's the reason why you have stuff like this going on. Burning buildings, raiding, shooting, and tearing up stuff. I said something to somebody just the other day over in Kenton, Tennessee, a little bitty old town, couple thousand. I go, yeah, if something like this was to come up to the point that one of these cops over here in Kenton, Tennessee, shoot an unarmed black person, I wonder if we would see stuff like this going on, or if they would take it laying down. The way that they've been henpecked around here, I'm going to say we would take it laying down. In other words, it never would even make the news. Whenever you're dealing with a bunch of sorry people that don't have no sense pertaining to justice, whenever you're dealing with sorry individuals that think that they can create their own laws in the back end of a courtroom, backwoods justice, in picking and choosing who they want to pick on and who they don't want to pick on in this area. Just like a person today said, you know, we're seeing 4 or 5 different cases just within the past month or so of illegitimacies that's going on pertaining to police brutality. What about all the cases that we're not seeing, where the cops got lucky and just so happens there wasn't nobody around with a video camera? Or if they snatched the video camera out of the individual's hand and said, well, you're not going to publicize this. You're not going to publicize this. And I guarantee you, if a cop was to shoot an unarmed black person either in Sharon, Tennessee, Martin, Tennessee, anywhere in Tennessee, and they had somebody on the sidelines that was videotaping it, if the cops could, they would immediately take that camera from that person and they would delete all the data pertaining to what they just got through witnessing. And they would tell that person to have a good day, and they would be lucky to get their phone back. They would be lucky to get their $1,000 phone back. Same thing happened to me out in California, out towards Lodi. Whenever I wasn't asked, but I was forced to leave a piece of property that I had just stayed at one night after giving almost $700 for rent. Because Miss Gloria, her son was the sheriff, and her son-in-law was a U.S. Marshal, and she owned one of the biggest nightclubs in Northern California. And just so happens I was renting from her, and she found out my background pertaining to what had went on in my life out in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. I actually had Hell's Angels, about 15 of them, with armed guns that loaded up all my belongings, throwed them in my truck, and told me that I was one lucky SOB. That's what's going on in the country. That's what's going on in the country. It is about Black Lives Matter. But it's also about justice. And whenever you have people just like this woman right here that was sentenced to life without parole over a drug charge, like Donald Trump just said, in today's society, she may not even got no time at all. Ruining people's lives just because they have the power to do so. You have an unjust service. You have an unjust system. Just like the boy was talking about a while ago that was holding a major protest up there in the White House. You got two different systems. You got a system for the white, and you got a system for the black. You got a system for those who can afford good attorneys to represent them, and then you got a system for those that are unfortunate that can't hire attorneys. David and I was hiring attorneys. David and I was trying to do the right thing in this area, and we was still being railroaded. Still being railroaded. Which speaks volumes about the attorneys in this area. I don't have to mention no names. All you got to do is look them up in the phone book. Because I guarantee you, these judges and these people that they call prosecuting attorneys have got these attorneys buffaloed to the point that, as far as I'm concerned, by you throwing your money towards these attorneys around here, you just will be pissing it down a drain. You just will be burning it, because they're going to look at you and laugh while you're sitting there going through what you're going through, and they could care less about justice. That's what's going on. In other words, this woman sitting in this seat right here in the purple or the pink blouse, she didn't have the right representation. And because she didn't have the right representation, instead of her getting the short dance, the short song, she got the long dance. She got the long song. And it goes on in Oklahoma, it goes on in California, it goes on in New York, it goes on in Tennessee, it goes on in Mississippi, it goes on all over this country. And you wonder how come there's almost 3 million incarcerated prisoners, either in federal, state, or local jails. And that ain't counting the people that's still on paper. That's on some sort of a probation deal. It's a damn racket. It's a damn racket that these judges and these attorneys has turned this into. And the people that supposedly go to church. And you wonder how come you have rioting? You wonder how come you have rioting?
She's looking for those people, and she's recommending those people, and we've already done some that you know are good people, and they've done really well since they've been out. So we're taking Alice from a commutation to a full pardon, and I'm going to sign it right now, and we're very proud of Alice and the job you've done and what you represent. And Pastor Robert Jeffers, unrelated, but he was here, and we thought maybe I'll sign this, and then maybe you'd like to say a prayer. And maybe you could include the media, because they need it probably more than we do. They definitely need it more than ours.
Well, let me ask you a question. It's a simple question. It's not an Einstein question. Do you really think that Trump is doing this on live TV because he's got control over the big mic? This man here can determine on who he puts up there, who he degrades, and who he supposedly morally supports. Do you really think that he cares about this woman, or the contents of what actually happened with this woman, or this woman's family, or how this woman wound up being charged with this type of charge and has spent over 20-something years of her life in a sentence that she never should have gotten to begin with? I mean, really, think about it. You're talking about the President of the United States of America. We're not talking about somebody that's in control of some sort of neighborhood watch. Do you really think that he cares? The only reason why he's doing what he's doing right now is simply because they finally are waking up and they're seeing this happen. And they're seeing this happen. This. They're seeing these things happening and they're realizing that they have screwed up. The system has become so corrupt and so evil that it don't just need to be overhauled. It needs to be completely, totally reworked. If they would have done what I asked them to do in 1983, and I realize it sounds like an old record, if they would have legalized marijuana during Ronald Reagan's administration after he got high himself towards testing marijuana, if they would have legalized it rather than turn it into a black market, you would not have the episodes that we're seeing right now unfold all over this country. But instead, you got people not only hooked on the drug, but you got people hooked on making money from the drug. I introduced the ideal of legalizing it because it was good for medical purposes. And at that time, 30-something years ago, they had no earthly idea that it was good for glaucoma. They had no earthly idea that it was good for chemotherapy because 30-something years ago, I don't even know that they was doing chemotherapy. But they had no idea that it has good implications for arthritis and bursitis and people's appetites and people's eyesights. But I knew that it did. And I also knew that if they didn't legalize it, it was going to be the same thing as the Prohibition era of running alcohol sales illegally in this country, give or take from probably the beginning of time till about the 1930s or 1940s of whenever they finally come down on Prohibition. Whenever they finally started legalizing these distilleries towards making their own moonshine and their own whiskey, their own bourbon. I tell you, whenever you're dealing with such of a society that is so corrupt and standing under the pretense of religion and doing what they're doing, oh, they're wicked. They are wicked right down to the core. And they will be held accountable, beginning with the Neal family in Kenton, Tennessee, beginning with the Damian Cross family in Kenton, Tennessee, beginning with the head honchos in Kenton, Tennessee, whenever they marked me and said that there was something wrong with this individual because this individual was attacked by his biological father after having 64 staples up and down his belly, and now he's requesting or requiring for us to help him. There is something wrong with this individual. And because there's something wrong, or because we think there's something wrong with this individual, we're going to go ahead and brand this individual towards being associated with the mental health community. And the whole time, the person that should have been branded with the mental health community should have been my father, James Robert Jackson. And now, 30-something years later, having a boy that's 41, I'm realizing that he's sicker than what my own biological father was, because he's still standing up defending his grandfather, just like these around here that's still standing up defending their ugliness towards not wanting to support a ministry that supports peace on the earth. I've never seen anything like it before. But let it go on. Let it continue to go on, because it's coming near a neighborhood near you. All in the name of God the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, pertaining to us being under the blanket of judgment towards this condemnation that all these so-called Christians around here have now brought upon to society. So sad.
That I can tell you. Okay,
So sad.
thank you. So Alice, it's a full pardon. It's been signed. You might want to keep that one. And here it is. Pastor, please. You take that down. Let's pray together.
That is Alice Johnson getting a full pardon. Originally, the president had commuted her sentence last night. She gave a speech at the RNC and she praised the president for giving.
I thought she did. I thought she spoke last night at the RNC.
Giving her a second chance. Now she has a full pardon from the president of the United States. Just down the street from the White House, thousands are gathered in the nation's capital for the anniversary of the March on Washington. From the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, they are heading to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s memorial for a new march, very much so in the spirit of the one that he led 57 years ago, and very much confronting much of
the protesters we talked. This is where I actually don't like the word hot, because we're looking at inflation going above. In not mentioning the police violence as much as they thought that they should. That's a big point of frustration among the crowd here today. What they can do about it is things like this. This March on Washington has been a very positive message today, very powerful message. It's a message of hope, but it's also a message of pain and frustration. I'm going to set the scene for you a little bit. Our photojournalist Jake Shire and I can kind of zoom over here. This crowd has just finished marching, or still marching actually, from the Lincoln Memorial to the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial. That thick throng of crowd right there, that's where the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial is. Some people moving, along the tidal basin, kind of moving away from the march. Others over here, still streaming in and just kind of milling around. But there's been some very powerful speeches today by the families of Jacob Blake, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, and others. And those relatives, their message is really being heard by the crowd here. Their message has been largely that this is the moment. If we don't get change in police reform now, in justice reform right now, they're worried that we may never get it. And I just spoke to two African-American ladies from Columbus, Ohio. They're both grandmothers. They're hopeful that those messages are coming through. They're hopeful.
Feel like Nancy Pelosi was in a deal-making mood. So I think the question's going to be in the next several days, do they come together? Is there any chance for some compromise to happen?
They say they have to have what they call the talk to them. Anytime.
Yourself and protect the black.
The science as a guide related.
You make of that comment about the black family unit, or if you're the black man? Well, when you look at the history of black people in America, and you look at what they had to go through, slavery and post-slavery movement, Jim Crow, and all the racial prejudice, the thing that really held them together was the family unit and the faith in God. And we see some of these movements cropping up now that are pushing God to the side, that don't recognize the traditional family unit. And as a result of that, you find the families falling apart. You find the kids growing up without a real compass and without, a person or a system to help them differentiate between right and wrong. And
that's because the family unit's been torn apart. I've been watching that for the past 20 years. Anytime you have a family that the mother has to work as well as the father has to work just to make ends meet, whenever the minimum wage is so low that the structure is torn apart, you're going to have complications like this, in addition to the divorces and the separations. The family unit is no longer the family unit. The conglomerates has taken it over. And they have purposely set the bait for people to go out here and buy decent cars, decent homes, decent clothes, decent this, just to be able to get along in society. And because of it, it has separated, or it has torn the fabric of the family completely in two, to where whenever I was growing up, born in 1961, believe it or not, it was still predominantly acceptable for a woman to stay at home and raise her children. It just so happens it's a good thing that my mother did have a good job towards having insurance on us boys, because I was basically an accident looking to happen. Accident prone is what I was accused of. I couldn't tell you the amount of times that I was in the emergency room getting cast on or being sewed up. And if our mother wasn't working, even though it was a little bitty whatnot sewing factory up the road here in Greenfield for 20-something years, almost 30 years, there was many a Christmases that we wouldn't even got a lollipop or a popsicle, much less 2 or 3 shirts or 2 or 3 pants or a brand new pair of shoes or a BB gun or some sort of recording device or a arcade to where we could play games on TV. We never would have gotten those things if my mother wasn't working towards splitting the family up. The conglomerates have come in and done this to the poor and the working class. And now we're seeing the results of it towards all this destruction and all this stuff going on. The rich, the powerful, is what has corrupted this great nation and has turned it into something that it wasn't supposed to have originally been.
And with no guidance.
Thunderstorms. Now, as we move into your Saturday, we'll still have some isolated showers.
You mentioned your old life. You were on the board of directors of the
here in the United States to a far greater extent than it has been out of
to you.
Well, it doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't make sense to any of us. The CDC has...
It's sickening in what has occurred here, because we have basically been hijacked by these multi-powerful industries, regardless whether it was insurance companies or other big conglomerates that basically left the workforce and left everybody holding an empty bag here in America towards going over to Mexico or South America or China and finding labor force over there that was cheaper than the labor force over here. And they're doing this all in the name of padding their own pockets. They're not doing this for the benefit of we the people. They're doing this so that they can have their 2 and 3 vacation homes, 4 or 5 private jets, so that they can put their own kids through college and teach them how to be extortionists too as well. They're tricking the American people by using the good old American pen, because they think that the pen is mightier than the sword. They think that the pen is mightier than the sword. And believe it or not, for the past 35, 40 years since World War II ended, 75 years ago, it has turned out to be just exactly that. The pen has turned out to have been more mightier than the sword, because they have waved the bait in front of the majority of the American people. The American people went for the bait towards buying a new car, buying a decent house, involving themselves in 401k, buying into this, buying into that. And now, since the biscuit's been pulled out of their mouths, people starting to wake up towards what the hell's going on here. What the hell has really happened here? Whenever you have over 30 million people crying out that has lost their jobs, you have a recipe for a perfect storm. And this, what we're seeing right now as far as police brutality, is only the beginning phases of what we're going to witness in the next few days, in the next few weeks, in the next few months, because of local digital media. You have just about everybody and their brother now that's got some sort of documentation device. People walking around in mass so that they can become more disguised if they do decide to participate in criminal activity, regardless whether it's stealing, house invasion, rape are going on a tangent as far as burning down buildings and tearing up stuff, you have the elements of a perfect storm. And that's exactly where our conglomerates, our wealthy, our rich, the Masons, the Illuminatis, the Bilderbergs, Walmart, Kmart, all the other big department stores, that's exactly where they wanted to put us. Below their feet. That way they could rule us. Incredible. Incredible. They almost got away with it. And would have had if I would have went ahead and died. If I would have went ahead and died and not been able to tell my story through the Me Too movement using my device, they would have gotten away with it. Beginning with the Reagan administration. The way that it was hijacked and taken over. Oh yeah.
Storm killed at least 10 people, more than 500,000 still without power. Jonathan Seri picks up the reporting in Lake Charles, Louisiana today. Hey Jonathan, how goes it?
Hi, Bill. Well, some of the latest fatalities involve people dying from carbon monoxide poisoning. A lot of people running generators indoors, which you should not do. But power's out to much of the region. You can see all the damage here. Over here, a funeral room, part of the roof ripped off on the ground, utility lines on the ground. And that's why rescue officials, first responders are urging people who evacuated the area not to come back just yet. It's very dangerous driving around. This area suffered sustained winds of 98 miles an hour, but gusts up to 132 miles per hour. Take a look at this video from the nonprofit disaster response service Marco Patriots. It shows an overturned train blown off the tracks by heavy winds that ripped through Lake Charles. Winds also dislodged the Isle of Capri's riverboat casino. It floated downstream until it stopped between pillars supporting a bridge for Interstate 10, which is now closed for inspection and repairs. In the neighboring town of Westlake, firefighters and hazmat teams are still on the scene of a chemical fire after they extinguished the initial fire at the Biolab manufacturing facility. Another one flared up. And today, Lake Charles Memorial Hospital, which sustained only minor damages in the storm, announced it's transferring inpatients to facilities in other areas because of damage to the city's water system. Bill, it's estimated more than 200,000 Louisiana residents are without running water at this time. Back to you.
That's going to take some time. Thank you, Jonathan. Good reporting down there to you and all the teams working that story. Thank you. Joe Biden.
It's going to take some time. Did you hear the commentator? It's going to take some time. You don't realize that there'll be people throughout that wreckage that will never recover. They will never recover, and they'll suffer from now on to the day they die. They didn't have proper insurance. Or the insurance is going to hoodoo them towards taking stuff away from them. Or this occurred, or that occurred. All these unforeseeables. In addition to the time, what it takes to build back a community like that. You're looking at 2 to 5 years, at the very minimum, just to clean everything up and to halfway get it looking back as a presentable community. Whenever they talk about time, they're not just talking about a few days. They're not just talking about a few weeks. They're not talking about a few months. They're talking about a few years. In the meantime, you got people that will be committing suicide because of this, because they'll feel like that their lives is over. It will affect not only the elderly, but it will affect the young, pertaining to people not being able to be educated properly. It will affect people's morale because they'll feel like that they have been basically whipped or beat up on because of the rich, the dominant, the predominant that wasn't listening to the signs 30 years ago whenever people like Al Gore was saying, we've got global problems, we've got environmental crisis. Because these people didn't listen, it has jeopardized all of our lives. The working man, the poor man, the senior citizens, our grandmothers, our grandfathers. And you wonder how come they're protesting? It ain't just about black lives. It's about all of our lives. This thing has been turned upside down. This year, 2020, will be the year that people remember above and beyond 9/11, above and beyond 1995 of the Oklahoma bombing, above and beyond any other major event, regardless whether it was the Vietnam War, the Korean War, or Desert Storm War. This event in 2020, historically speaking, looking at it through the eyes of the historians, will be looked upon as being one of the messed up years. Not just here in America, but throughout the planet.
Biden's firing back at legendary Notre Dame football coach Lou Holtz, who says the former VP is only Catholic in name. I'll talk to the coach.
Very sharp decrease, a very sharp increase in the markets. The economy on the
point to Japan's debt to GDP ratio, which wealthy planet, to give more than we take. That's why we're proud to be 1% for the planet's chief global
schools opening back up, and clearly progress on therapeutics or a vaccine for the virus is something that would get us through that next hurdle, where that's so important for the economy, with people being much more comfortable with indoor activities, restaurants, bars, sporting events, etc., 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 etc.
See, they want to point their finger at Trump, towards Trump being the scapegoat. It's people like this, the doctors, the scientists, the professional people, ministers, teachers, theologians, the people that's already made a success out of their lives that have failed all of us. They get on there and they spew stuff out that they don't know what they're talking about. There was at least 3 months, I know, possibly 4, to where you couldn't even find a mask. The only way that you could find a mask was to make a mask. You had to literally make a mask. Now, everybody's being flooded by all these masks, and now everybody's being flooded by all these sand hand, you know what I'm talking about. The elderly, the pillars of the community, is what has failed us. That has put everybody where we are right now.
And driving, Phil Flynn. Because in many cases, countries are dealing, including Japan, are dealing with the COVID crisis and how to manage their economy in the face of this incredible headwind. So whoever comes in has a two-way punch to deal with. One is the very immediate concerns associated with COVID and how to manage the economy through that. But, in the longer term, all economies, Japan, maybe more than most, have to deal with both the question about rising living standards, as well as how to promote debt sustainability. And really, the only way that countries are going to be able to do that is with a package of policies that generate a lot more private sector activity, private sector investment.
Is to start all over again. That's the only way that it's going to happen. Because the rich man, the powerful man, has literally put us in a unbearable, unsustainable position. These young people out here working, barely for minimum wage, their lives is over. Their lives is over. That's why they're out there protesting. The next thing you know, they'll turn to crime. They'll turn to lawlessness. And it will even get worse. And worse. And worse. It's called survival to the fittest. It happens in every culture whenever you have this type of a breakdown. When you have this kind of a breakdown, you'll see places like America turn into a banana republic, a third world country, in lots of different ways. And we're just now starting to see the beginning phases of it towards what to expect coming near a neighborhood near you, just like the Walmart slogan.
To leave all their bases. And we handed all those positions to Russian forces and Syrian regime force.
It's 2%, likely keeping interest.
Silver, wampum.
See the news.
Things for sure. You've got, what, 1 week left, and then the entire country is back in session. So somebody's got to make a decision soon. Back to you.
We're not going to forget this year. Thanks, Christina. Nice to see you today. Race for the White House entering its final stretch as both parties wrap up their conventions. In a moment, a look at where things stand.
The news is unfocused. They only focused on that standoff or that stuff going on up in Washington, D.C., that march, just for a short length of time. And now they're back to promoting what they're paid to promote, which once more makes them very, very biased, because it's not about news. It's about what people pay them to say is news. The news is very, very corrupt. It is fake news because they're not predicting news as news should be predicted. Or not predicted, but as news should be promoted. That's why they call news news. If the big balloon, the Hindenburg, that same event was to happen again in 2020, they would only cover it for a few minutes. Just for a few minutes. And they would go back to all their other news that they claim is news. Oh, we'll squeeze something in there that we wasn't planning on squeezing in there because it was the Hindenburg that blowed up. But then after that, we got to go right back to our same old, same old.
Just hours after Hurricane Laura barreled through the area, thick smoke could be seen pouring out from the biolab plant where pool and cleaning chemicals are made. Residents have been told to shelter in place until further notice. Now, all of this as residents slowly begin cleanup efforts. More than 800,000 in southeast Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas, and Mississippi remain without power, and more than 220,000 are still without water right now. Listen to Jeff Locke. He's in Lake Charles, Louisiana, and I bet the toughest thing for these folks today is wanting to go back to check on their homes and being told not to because of the water.
Well, well, true.
Right through it. Watch this. Tired of fumbling with your failed stem cell transplant? And one call to MD Anderson Cancer Center.
I'm going to leave it there with my viewers. As we always say, and we'll continue to say, as long as they'll allow us on the airwaves. Good luck to all of us, and shalom. Good luck to each and every one of us. Wow.